Fifth? Which is right? Does it really matter? Because for me, don't worry about it. Fifth or sixth? Six, okay. Excellent. For me, the talks don't end. If I'm not giving a talk here, I give a talk somewhere else. And that's my job. And sometimes I wonder, if I'm not giving a talk anywhere, I'm sure that evening I talk in my sleep. It's just habit. And you know that once when Ajahn Chah, he would always give some interesting talks, but then one evening, when I fell asleep, had some nice meditation, but still had to have some sleep. And he was still alive, but he was not talking anymore. And I had this wonderful dream of him. And in that dream, it was very vivid, very clear, and he gave me a Dhamma talk. This was, I think it was about 3 or 4 years after he had his stroke and couldn't speak at all. And there he was in my dream giving a talk. It was a brilliant talk. And because you could see him clearly in the dream, and it was a brilliant talk, and he couldn't give talks for about 2 or 3 years, I thought, wow, this is very special. So I determined that I must remember what he said. And then he came to the end of the talk, and I knew in a moment I'd wake up, I must remember this, I must remember this. And then I woke up, you know what happened? I forgot it all. I couldn't remember it. And so I always call that Ajahn Chah's talk to me on dukkha, on suffering. What you wanted, you can never get. And sometimes I thought, wow, what an amazing teaching that was. And so this morning, I'm going to give a very uplifting talk on dukkha, suffering. But don't worry, there's a happy ending to it. Because that's one of the problems of life which we're compelled to fix. There is suffering in this world. Why? Surely we're wise enough and smart enough to be able to arrange life. We work hard. We do have quite a lot of resources. Why can't we make these mats you're sitting on thicker and more comfortable? Could you do that? Suppose that I said, well, thank you all for coming here, and I say that, because you're just sitting in front, Bali, that how many times have you been on retreat so far? Uncountable, yeah. Okay, because of all the times, I can use psychic powers and I'll give you the most comfortable meditation cushion. What would it be? What would you want? You see how much suffering that is? Thinking of how you can get a comfortable cushion. When you don't have a comfortable cushion, it's just what you have. It's not so much suffering. It's amazing that we all know as monks and nuns, we're not allowed to accept or keep any personal stashes of cash, no money. But I do remember there is a loophole. And I like loopholes. Is there any, are there any lawyers here? It's okay to admit it, don't be embarrassed or ashamed. But anyway, that I sort of remember that learning the monks' rules and the nuns' rules, there was a loophole. They called it mendicant allowance. So if you've done a service to someone, you can go up to them and say, well, I know I can't give you any money, but please, I invite you. If there's anything you need, I would like to buy it for you. And you usually give like a limit, like $100 or $150 or something. And so that happened to me the first time. Please never do this to me. Because this guy, I helped him on something or other, and he said, that was so helpful for me. You really relieved a lot of my difficulties. And I would like to offer you something. And he said, for it was 100 baht, the Thai currency. 100 baht is, I think in those days, was worth about $3. Not that much. But at least it was something. Things were cheap in those days. So he said, what can I get you for $100? Offer, 100 baht, sorry. And it just kind of shocked me. I was a simple monk in my hut, didn't really need very much. And so I thought, oh, let me think about it. And he said, look, I'm busy, I've got to go back to work. And I came up with this wonderful idea. Why don't you come back tomorrow and I'll think about your offer and I will get back to you what I want. He had a very good idea. 100 baht. And so he went away. And that night, I went into my little huts, we call them kutis, and I had a piece of paper. The only paper I had was what was wrapping a mosquito coil. I didn't have any paper. So on that paper to wrap the mosquito coil, on the blank side, I sort of wrote down, like notepaper. And actually, as I was writing it down, the pencil broke. So the next thing I wrote down, just about, was like a little biro pen, nothing fancy, just a little ballpoint pen. And then it was so difficult to see. So I said, what I next need is probably one of those little oil lamps. And with those oil lamps, imagine what it's like, in the rainforest, trying to light them. The matches always get soaked, and just to strike it on the matchbox, and it all disintegrates. It never lights. So I said, one of those cigarette lighters. I don't smoke cigarettes, but that's much more efficient than matchsticks. I said, well, we're talking about lights, a proper flashlight. Because in these forests, there are snakes around. Not just snakes, some of these like biting ants. And I remember once, carrying an ordinary flashlight and stepping on these ants. The flashlight went one way, I went another way, jumping, and I was in the darkness of the forest. It's really dangerous. So I said, a nice flashlight. And then I looked at what I'd already written down, and that must cost much more than 100 baht. And once I'd written it down, I couldn't take it off the list. And when I was thinking what I can take off, then I said, well, it's not just writing on pieces of paper. What I really need is also some those aerograms, so I can send some letters to my mother back in UK to make sure she knows I'm okay. And all these other things kept coming up into my mind, and I wrote it on this old piece of paper. And the paper wasn't big enough to put all these things which I really needed now. Before then, I was so happy having nothing, but now, once I thought about it, how would I survive without this? And they were really necessary. And I kept on thinking of more things which I needed. And at least I had the insight at that time to realize when people ask me what I want, if I just buy into that, then any piece of paper is never big enough. So I took that piece of paper, screwed it up and threw it into the waste bin with a feeling of victory over wanting. I was really a simple monk in those days. But once you had the opportunity to get something, that caused so much suffering. When you didn't have the opportunity, you were really happy. When you had the opportunity, that caused so much stress in your mind. Now what about you? How much do you want? Okay, you asked me to tell this story at Nolamara a few days ago about wanting. This also emphasizes this story about overcoming suffering. And that was the one about the bhikkhuni who lived in the cave, who had a mouse as her companion in the cave. And then one day, when she got up in the morning, she was preparing to go on alms round, and she saw that the mouse had chewed a hole in her robe. And so, oh my goodness, I better I'll put a patch on this hole as soon as possible before I go out on alms round. This was not the first patch she put on her robe. That mouse would always eat her robes. They must have been very holy robes or very delicious. I said this to someone that didn't believe me, but it's true. The first year we had this Vihara in North Perth. We had some relics in there, just a small number of relics. And this drunken man, he broke into the house just for a nice place to stay that night. And then he saw the relics, he didn't know what they were, so he ate them. It's the first time I've seen anybody eating relics. What do you think we said to him? We didn't say cough him up or, spit him out. They're all in his tummy. So we just let him go away with those relics and hoping he would actually stop drinking from now. I don't know if it worked, but anyhow. So, this nun, this bhikkhuni, a long time ago, she had these kind of getting holes in her robes. So as she was sewing it up, she started thinking, how can I solve this problem so I don't have to keep spending hours and hours every day sewing up my robes? And she thought, a cat. That's what I need. If I had a little cat in my cave, then even the smell of the cat would actually mean that the mouse never comes in. And it's easy to get a cat. There's so many cats. People often, in those days, they weren't monasticized. In other words, they had many kittens. When they have a kitten, they have a whole heap of them. And people always love to get rid of the cats by sharing them with their friends. It's usually very easy, I say, if you have any extra kittens, to actually find a nice home for them, a loving home. You just bring them to Nolamara one Friday night, let them loose in the Dharma hall when I'm giving a talk, and those little cats go all over the place. They're so cute and lovable, and it's usually a bit of a fight afterwards who will actually adopt them. But I let the cat choose. But anyway, they always find a home very quickly. But anyway, this nun, she went on alms round, she asked the villagers, has anyone got a spare cat which I can adopt? And of course, she got a little sweet little cat very easily. And then when she had her cat, of course, it scared the mice away, so her robe never needed to be mended. But then there was another problem. Now the cat needed something to feed on. Some milk or something to eat. And so she had to ask the villagers, can I have a little bit of milk every day or some food for the cat? And they were very happy to help her because the cats don't eat that much. But nevertheless, that was another burden, having to carry not just her food, but carry the food for her cat, just to keep the mice away, so she didn't need to keep mending her robes. And then she thought, that's a bit of a burden asking for food for the cat every day. So, what if, especially milk, what if I asked for a cow? Because if I had my own cow, I could milk it. That's pretty easy to do. That's not against the rules for nuns to milk cows, is it? No. So, there was one of these big holy days, on the full moon, and then she asked them, said, it'd be very nice and helpful if you offered a cow to me. And she explained why. in order to get milk, to feed the cat, to keep the mouse away, so she didn't have so much time wasted mending her robes. So they got her a nice cow. And for a week or so she milked that cow, but the cows have to have something to eat as well. So she asked the villagers to bring some grass or some hay. So that was a lot of work and a lot of burden for the villagers. You know, when you come to a monastery, you don't expect just to bring hay to the monastery, but that's what the villagers had to do into the cave. So she thought, no, this is too burdensome. What if I have a field? Only a small little paddock with nice hay, and then I can let the cow graze there, and I won't need to find hay. It will be able to feed itself. So on another big day, like a Wesak day, people wanted to offer some nice things, for her. She was very helpful. So they collected their money together and they bought a nice little field so the cow could graze happily in the field, and she just needed to go every day actually to milk it in a bucket and then bring the bucket back for the cow to drink its milk. But then that was burdensome too. So she thought, what I really need is like an attendant. Can you milk cows?
I guess so.
There had to be a lay attendant, like Anthony over there. Have you ever milked a cow? It's easy to learn. So if I had a little boy attendant, because sometimes, in any village, there's some of the boys are naughty, and the parents thought, well, if I can get our boy to stay with the nun to help her, such as milking the cow in the morning and making sure the cow's okay, then that influence of being close to a good bhikkhuni would actually help our son. That's a very good idea. So they offered this son to the bhikkhuni, and the son, the boy, would go milk the cow every morning, make sure all the fences were okay, and bring the stuff back to the nun, so she didn't have to milk the cow herself, so the cat had enough milk to keep the mouse away, so it didn't need to mend her robes. But then you got a boy. A boy cannot stay in a cave together with a bhikkhuni. We all know that's wrong. So they said, well, we need to build a little house outside the cave, for the boy. So she asked for some wood and some help from some carpenters to build a little kuti outside the cave so the boy could stay there to serve the nun. But it's not just a house. That boy too needed food and education. And then this nun was arranging all of that one day when one of the villagers passed her and said, excuse me, I'm having some difficulty in my meditation. Can you help me? And the nun said, I'm terribly sorry, I can't do that today because I'm so busy arranging the carpenters to build this little hut for my boy who looks after the cow in the field which I own and looks after the field as well. So I can get some milk to feed the cat, to keep the mouse away so I don't need to keep mending my robes. Sorry, I've got no time. And at that, just as you could understand, she got some insight. And so she told all the builders to go home, sold all the wood, send the boy home, get the cow a nice home, sold the field, and gave the cat away. And as soon as she gave all those burdens away, she felt so at ease. And the next morning when she woke up in her cave, there was another hole in her robe. The mouse had returned. And this time, that bhikkhuni happily sewed the patch on her robe. That was much easier than actually getting a cat, getting food for the cat, getting a cow, getting a field, getting a boy, building a hut for that boy. It was much easier. And the person who told me that story years ago That was actually what materialism is. We've got all these things to make it more convenient, so we think, but takes away all our time. Is that true, Anthony? So you know what we're doing now over in Bodhinyana Monastery? We're building a new kitchen so we can have more. You can see how the world works. So that's why, someone built for me, I never requested it, a nice cave. And I just go in there and leave the world. And the other monks, they can build whatever they blooming want. You can see how it works, all this wanting. We do this because we feel it's going to solve suffering. But it usually makes more suffering. So why can't we just go back to like a nice, simple life? And that's even here. We try and encourage people. When you're here, just leave your iPhones alone. If it's something really, really bad happens, yeah, marvelous. It's the world. That's what it happens. But things really, really bad never happen. It's usually much worse than that. I don't know if you've ever experienced this, that when you go on retreats, sometimes when you go off retreat and you go back, you can't imagine just how people respond. They over-respond to things. One year when I was during our rains retreat, and I had my own personal retreat, and when I'm on a personal retreat, I don't go walking around anywhere. I stay really close to my hut, so I don't see things and I don't know things. And I do that because it's so quiet. And I remember one year when I came off retreat, even the monks were really upset. And I was wondering why, what's going on? And then the lay people I saw, they were really sort of dull and unhappy. Why, what's going on? And they said, haven't you heard? Princess Diana has died. That was the time when she had a car crash and lost her life. And I said, it's so sad. And I asked them, are you related to her? And they said, no, we're not related. We're so sad. People have been watching too much TV or radio or whatever on newspapers. And of course that was the front page all over the world. Even if you don't even know her. Oh, Princess Diana's died, it's so sad. You can see just how we have suffering. Why? Do all the tears which are shed, all the complaints, does that bring it back to life? Or just make a sad society, takes away your happiness for no real reason? I think you all know what I do when somebody passes away and dies. And it's a cliche today, to celebrate the life. But I've been doing that for years, ever since my own father died. It's kind of weird, but when he died, he was at home, my home at the time, and I tried to wake him up in the middle of the night. He didn't respond, he was cold. He died. And I was only 16, and even though you're right there, touching him, and he's dead, and I love my father very much. But I never, ever felt sad that he died. It was kind of, how come? What am I suppressing? I wasn't suppressing anything. He was dead. And even at the funeral service, I never cried. And I kind of felt guilty at the time. Is there something which, you're hiding? And your own father had died. Why don't you cry? But you have to be honest to your emotions. And that's why it's years later, when you were a monk. That's a nice thing of going on retreats or being a monastic. It means that you've got time. Like all the time you have here on this 9-day retreat, and some of you come beforehand, some of you stay later. It gives you the opportunity to investigate things, to explore it, to get insight, not just into anicca, dukkha, anatta, but insight into life and death. And why do people get upset? So I looked at my emotions. And when you investigate, you explore, there's amazing things happen. Because I noticed how I felt when my father died. I'd had that same emotion many times before, but in very weird places. Usually after listening to a great concert. Now I remember telling many people all the great concerts I went to as a kid, to the Rolling Stones once. I was only 11 years of age. That's when I stopped liking girls. You know why I stopped liking girls at a Rolling Stones concert? Because all these girls were so noisy. Mick Jagger, I wasn't trying to listen to the music. You couldn't hear a thing. So, But also many other types of concerts, classical and jazz. And just after the great performance, even though I knew you'd never hear that music ever again, I never felt sad. I never cried after a great performance. And even one which most people could relate to, I remember just going to a little venue above a pub in North London. And the singer there was, he wasn't that well known. There was only about 6 of us turned up to watch him. And now his name was Rod Stewart. Now Rod Stewart, you know who he is? What? Oh, at least one person knows. Goodness gracious. I must be really old. Because all the heroes of my youth, only people the same age as me know that. But anyway, he's still alive, but very famous. But then after the concert, what do you do after a concert finishes? You shout and go encore, encore, and then after the encore, the singer or the band or the orchestra has to stop and go home. And I had to walk out these auditoriums or concert halls in the opposite direction. And as I walked out, I realized I would probably never hear that music ever again. So did I cry? No way. I felt what a wonderful experience that had been. To hear some of this music or these plays, which were fantastic. It enriched my life. I'd learned so much. So I never felt sad at all. It wasn't suffering. No suffering there at all. It was just this wonderful sense of the celebration of what life really is. We have these opportunities to hear great music, to be with great teachers like an Ajahn Chah. We know it's not going to last. But when he does pass away, we think, thank you so much. Thank you for being my teacher. You remember all these stories, which you heard and grew with. So it wasn't actually how to deal with suffering. Suffering is part of life, and it's how we learn. And when we understand it, we find we don't cry. It doesn't really hurt us. It's just part of the sweet and sour of life. Even here in Western Australia, I was looking at the sky this morning when I went out after breakfast, going back to my room for some breakfast. And I was telling Ajahn Muda, I'm looking for a cloud. Oh, there's a cloud over there in the far north. There was actually a cloud. I actually saw a cloud today. And I was so enjoying seeing a cloud. Because we haven't had any rain in about 6 months. So seeing a cloud there was really exciting. If you go on a holiday somewhere and you see a cloud, oh, it's a miserable day. Oh, there's a cloud today. If you're going for a marriage ceremony, you see a cloud in the sky, how do you feel? Oh, bad luck. But are the clouds, are the rain bad luck? It really depends. If it's nice rain, it's beautiful. And even when it's nice rain, sometimes when it stops, you get that contrast. And that makes it very interesting. Okay? Psychic powers. I know when I say that, people get interested. I saw a few people getting a bit tired. So, we've been here in Western Australia for many years. And one of our members once told me that we were about to have, I think it was the 30th anniversary. The 30th anniversary of the Buddhist Society of Western Australia. This was about 20 years ago. So we said, well, let's celebrate it. Like, we were quite well known, growing very fast. Let's celebrate, the 30 years of Buddhism in Perth. And so they said, let's do a big ceremony. And it just so happened, all of the heavenly beings were with us. The good luck was there, because we were formed on the Wesak 30 years ago, and we decided to celebrate it on Wesak. But if Wesak's on a Tuesday or something, no one comes, they've got to go to work. So Wesak that year was on a Sunday. And so we decided to have this big ceremony on Sunday in Supreme Court Gardens in Perth. That's a big venue in the centre of Perth. But it's so popular, there was no chance we could book it. So we thought, but we called up anyway. So yeah, there was a cancellation. It's free on that day. Do you want to use it? Oh yeah. This is right in the centre of Perth. Everybody would see it on a Sunday. And also, on that day, separately, some Thai people were offering a new golden Buddha statue to the temple in Perth. So this is going to arrive just in time. We can have it as a almost centerpiece, of our ceremony in Supreme Court Gardens. And also, let's see if we can invite important people. And I don't know if you know this, but Ajahn Sujato, his sister was the PA, personal assistant, of this politician called Jeff Gallup, and that was when he was the leader of the opposition, the opposition opposition leader. But during that time they had an election, and Mr. Jeff Gallup won that election. So he became the Premier. We already had a contact, we used that contact. He said, yeah, I'll come. We had the Premier of the state coming to a big celebration of Buddhism, and a couple of, what they call them, politicians. I think the Thai ambassador came, and a few other people came. We booked them all in. Yes, they were going to come. So like many of these things, forget about how much it costs. Let's make a good showing. And so we had everything organized. We worked so hard. We told all the press outlets and the TV outlets. And that morning, Wesak in May, when I woke up over in Serpentine, ready to work my butt off that day, you looked outside of the window. It was raining. But I thought, if it rains now, that's probably good, because the rain will stop by the evening. And then we looked at the weather forecast. Rain all day. There was a storm coming, a severe weather event. How many of you came to that? I know Amanda's did. Didn't you? Yes. Yeah. Please correct me if I exaggerate or say anything which is not accurate. It was raining in the morning when we, after breakfast, we got into the van and drove up to Perth. And every time we checked the weather forecast, the big weather event storm was supposed to hit Perth at 7:30 p.m. that was the time we were going to start the ceremony. And the omens were really bad. And so many times, actually 3 times, the Premier's office called, and someone had the mobile phone, "Are you cancelling?" What do you think I answered? "No." The second time, "Are you cancelling?" "No." "Are you cancelling?" "No." And even one of the monks, he grabbed me by the shoulder, pulled me aside and said, "Ajahn Brahm, you're embarrassing us. It's supposed to be show at least that we are, what do you call it, humble enough to cancel and not be stupid about this." And I said, "No." And we had one of our disciples, he used to be in the Merchant Navy. That was old Brian Creek. He took me aside too and said, "Ajahn Brahm, look, I've been on these boats, going across the ocean all my life. I looked at the barometer. The storm's going to come. It's going to get much worse than this. We have to cancel." "No." And I was very proud of all the people who helped out, because they were, they were getting soaking, and that never stopped them. They worked so hard. And we'd set everything up, and I was about an hour before the ceremony was to start, still raining. I was in the VIP tent just arranging some of the chairs for those who were still coming. And then I was doing that. For those of you who know Cherry Jackson, she works as a volunteer admin assistant in Nolamara Temple. Her mother, Shirley, she was such a strong supporter of whatever we did. And she came running into the VIP tent, crying, "Ajahn Brahm, you've got to come out." And I thought, oh no, what's gone wrong now? I thought someone was probably electrocuted or something or fallen over something, broken their leg, I don't know what. And then I will never forget this, when she dragged me out of the VIP tent, she never said anything, she just pointed up. And there you saw the sky had cleared, the clouds had gone, and the beautiful full moon of Wesak was there up in the sky to be admired. That's why I had to come out quickly, while she was shocked she couldn't speak. And that cloud stayed clear till the end of the ceremony. There was a brief shower, but it was very light, it wasn't heavy storms. And we did the ceremony in the dry. And then afterwards, once the ceremony was finished, it poured down. Once the ceremony was finished. And that Supreme Court Gardens field flooded. And even they called it, what's it called again? The road in front. The Esplanade, yeah. That flooded too, the freeway flooded. It was a really heavy storm. And we managed to do the ceremony. So the rain, if it hadn't have rained, it wouldn't have impressed people so much. I remember there was a community channel came, and they were doing a video of it. And as they were videoing it, the interviewer was just saying, "This is weird. This is weird. This is weird." She was kind of in shock. So we had a wonderful ceremony, to show just the support which Buddhism had in Western Australia. This was not just stopping a little rain. This was a heavy storm, and one of the heaviest we've had in that area. And it stopped in order for us to do the Wesak ceremony and the 30th anniversary of the Buddhist Society of Western Australia. And the next day, one of the organisers they got a email, from the company who loaned out all of the electric work and the PA system and the tents and chairs. And I'll never forget that email. The email said, "You actually held a ceremony?" I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Who is this Ajahn Brahm? I don't know who he is, but can you ask him who's going to win the horse racing today?" But sometimes you work with difficulties. You don't work against them. And you can gain so much inspiration, what could have been suffering. So when difficult situations... Amandus, is that a pretty accurate description?
Yes.
There we go. Amandus doesn't lie. I was going to say he's too old to lie, but I can't say that. But that actually gave people a lot of confidence, in what we were doing. It was very good, incredibly good PA for us. And so because of things like that, instead of suffering and cancelling and taking the easy option, sometimes it's great to just really get in there and go for it. And that's one of the reasons why, no matter what weather it is, no matter what happens, somebody dies, you celebrate their life, what you've learned from them. You take all the good stuff. Why cry? And all the other things which happened. How many of you had relationships which turned sour? Do you get upset, if, you have a partner and they dump you? Not me. I think I mentioned to you, I had a partner, when I was 19. For about 6 months, she dumped me. Thank you so much for dumping me. If you hadn't have dumped me, who knows, you may have got married and I wouldn't be here today to enjoy my life as a monk. So if somebody dumps you, say to them, "Thank you so much. Now I'm free." Or even other tragedies happen to you in life. I know what's another tragedy. There was one of my favorite monks in Thailand. His name was Chaukuntep Siddhimuni. And his story, which inspired me, he was an intellectual, a scholar, and a teacher of Pali and Buddhism. And he was so well respected, even though he was a great scholar and had a lot of renown. He lived a simple life, not many possessions. But then, because of his natural abilities, he was in line to be the next Sangharaja of Thailand. Even though he wasn't really interested, but he was just too good at his job. And the one behind him, the number 3 in line to be the head monk of Thailand, was incredibly jealous. He really wanted the status of being the boss. It's absolutely crazy to want to be the boss. When I first came to Australia, I had it all worked out. I was number 2 monk. So I could do lots more meditation, enjoy myself, do more studies, write some more articles. It was lovely being number 2. And then, unfortunately, the number 1 boss, that was Ajahn Jokara, he fell in love and disrobed. And I was held literally holding the baby. No, not literally, I can't say that, there was no baby. But there was all the heavy work to be done of leading this crew. But, you had no choice. So my great plans never worked out. But this monk, he was about to, once the current Sangharaja died, that he was about to be the next one. And the 3rd monk thought, no, I don't want this to happen. So the third monk started taping some of this second monk's talks and editing them. And in these days, it's actually called fake news. It's not that hard to do. You take some photographs here, say some of the things he said, quote them out of context, and then sooner or later, he had the case at that time in Thailand that teaching or promoting communism was against the law. And so this third monk, through one of his friends, accused the second monk of promoting communism. And they had a trial. He was found guilty and put in jail for 2 years. During that time, the head monk did die, and so the third monk got his dream and became the head monk of Thailand. And he was driving in a convoy, with police cars in front and behind, to Don Mueang Airport. That was the main airport in those days. And then a car travelling on the opposite side of the road lost control, went over the medium strip, and then slammed into the VIP car right where the Sangharakja was actually sitting, and killed him immediately. No one else was injured. And it was such a weird traffic accident. Only one person was injured, and that was the Sangharakja. Everyone else was fine. And so if that's Thailand, they think, this is weird. There must be some karmic cause for this. So what has this senior monk done? And that's when they revisited this case and found it was totally trumped up, false. And so they released the head monk. Now if you're a monk and go to jail, according to the Thai law, you don't wear brown robes, you have to wear white robes while you're in jail. But it doesn't mean you've disrobed, you're just wearing white robes in order to make sure you're not demeaning the brown robe, which is held in great esteem over in Thailand. But he was still keeping all his precepts, still eating only in the morning time, not having any money. And he said in his biography that this was the best time of his life. For 2 years he was in this lovely cell, which was probably more comfortable than many monks' kutis, even though it's in prison. He had no responsibilities, the food was brought to him, he never needed to answer questions on interviews, he never needed to give any talks, no one asked him questions on his meditation. He had all this wonderful free time. It was like going on a 2-year meditation retreat. He said, the best years of my life. And when I read that, it was a kind of sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Why make it suffering? Just take advantage of it. You just don't know sometimes I think, what have I done wrong? If you can find something, please take it to court and give me a retreat. I've been to Karnak Prison Farm, it's not bad there. You get good food, you can rest. They don't work very hard. But anyhow, that example of a monk who went to jail, which for many people will be suffering. They think, oh, my reputation has gone. Just who I am, just people always look at me as a criminal from now on. No. Many famous people have been to jail. Gandhi, he went to jail many times. What a great person he was. Mandela, brilliant person. Who else has been to jail? Jack the Ripper? No, he's not.
Philippines Prime Minister lady.
Who?
The politician, the female one, Asia somewhere. Philippines or...
Okay, yeah. No, I'm not talking about really amazing people. But anyhow, it doesn't ruin your reputation, because your reputation can be much bigger than that. Things go wrong in your life. you can turn them to an advantage. Sometimes people lose their job. You know that sometimes, during the time of COVID, and there's many companies, they had to sack or lay off people. What a wonderful time that was when people come to me, as they do, for some counselling, say, I've got no work anymore, it's COVID time, you can't go to interviews, you can't do anything. And I said, the last time you came to see me for some counselling, you were saying just how tired you were and how stressed you were, how you never had time to do this and do that and feed and meet your family, your close family. Now you've got all the time in the world. You've lost your job. Why are you upset? So if you do lose a job, wonderful. You've got more free time to actually do some meditation. If you get cancer and have to do radiation therapy, you lose all your hair, wonderful. You can come and become a monk or a nun. You've already got your head shaved. It's easy to fit in. It's not like a positive attitude, it's understanding what dukkha is and how to overcome it. Why is it we create more dukkha than we need? There's always going to be difficulties in life. There's always going to be things we don't expect. How do we make use of them? That was one of the reasons why one of Ajahn Chah's most well-respected statues, which was in Ajahn Buddhadasa's monastery, was of this monk. His arms were up in the air like this, blissing out. And the caption was, joy at last, to know there's no happiness in the world. Do you understand? In other words, there's going to be disappointments and sufferings, good times end, and things are always changing. When you can accept that, and understands its reason why it's like that, and understand its purpose and its meaning, joy at last. A lot of times, that's what people complain about. They have a kid who dies, and they ask, why? What is the meaning of a 4 or 5-year-old kid just suddenly having some sort of heart attack? He's only 4 or 5 and dying. When we understand the meaning, the purpose, it makes these things more acceptable. And the meaning is just to know that this is always going to be the nature of life. And it doesn't really matter how long you spend with people you love. What's most important is the quality of that time, not quantity of time. Even 4 or 5 years. Some of the children who pass away, that means so much to the mother, or the father, or the brothers. It's a Dhamma teaching which makes life more important, more meaningful. Even I don't mind saying this one. Like Burr, how hard she works for our Buddhist society. And she doesn't come on this retreat, but she'll be here next week for the next Jhana Grove committee meeting. And you know that she never really was such an active member of our Buddhist society until one evening her daughter went to Burswood for a dance. I think she was only 18 years of age. And on the dance floor, she collapsed and died. She had a congenital heart defect which no one knew. And so I remember just her friends called me and said, look, the whole family are just so incredibly shocked. Their healthy young daughter, 18 years of age, had literally fallen down dead on a dance floor. It wasn't any drugs, it was just congenital heart defect. And so I remember talking to them And if you think that Burr is always so bright and vibrant, she was so incredibly miserable at that time. It took a lot of counseling and talking, but eventually she saw the meaning in it. The meaning in it that just the story of that old monk in the north of Thailand years ago. And he was staying in this remote monastery, just in a simple hut, bamboo and thatch. And there was a huge storm. Many branches came down, and even trees were uprooted and came crashing down on the forest floor. It was so dangerous that he was awake all night. And in the morning, when the storm stopped, he went outside his hut to look at the damage. Many of those trees had come so close to hitting his hut. And if one had hit his hut, it was only bamboo and thatch. Those heavy branches or trees would just squash him, kill him. And so he looked at those trees which had been uprooted. He was very, very lucky. Some had come so close to hitting his hut. But what took his attention most of all was not the trees which had been uprooted, but the leaves which the storm had torn off the twigs and branches of those trees. Most of the leaves on the forest floor were old brown leaves. Leaves which had been up on the trees for such a long time, lived a full life. But many of the leaves on the forest floor were yellow leaves, green leaves, and even a few very young green leaves of that colour which told him they must have only shot forth the day before. They too lay dead on the forest floor, even though they were so young. He looked up at the leaves which were left on the trees. They're mostly the green leaves. But even though many young green leaves had been torn off that tree and lay dead, there were still a few curly, dark brown, old leaves still clinging on to the branches and twigs. So now I'm looking around, who's the oldest in here today? Old brown leaves, still clinging on, even though the young green leaves lay dead. And when he saw that, he understood the meaning of life and death. It doesn't always take the old ones who keep coughing. It's not the cough that carries you off, it's the coffin they carry you off in. So that man is probably going to live another 30 years. And the young Anagarika next to you, Giacomo, how old are you now?
44.
44, you're on your last legs, are you? You better not be. But anyway, that's the meaning of life and death. It teaches you it's uncertain. No one knows. Which means that you make the best use of your time when you still have that time. This is a meditation retreat. How many days are left to go? How many? How many? 3, 4, 5? You've got 4 days. Don't call it 4 days, call it 96 hours. Call it 5,760 minutes. Is that right? That's 300,000 seconds. You only had 1 second to find that letting go button and zap you in these deep meditations. Just 1 second afterwards to see the Dhamma and to realize, happiness at last. when there's no joy in the world, you can let it go. It's easy to let it go when you don't cherish it. And then you can be free. Free like the bird. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Hope I didn't bore you with that on dukkha. The next one, tomorrow, is uncertain. I don't know. Probably anatta, who knows. We know sometimes they don't just do anicca, dukkha, anatta. Sometimes they add sunya in, emptiness. That's really nice. Do you like emptiness? I usually want to talk about emptiness on the last day of the retreat, to advise everybody that the donation box is empty. No, sorry. Okay, let's carry on talking rubbish. So we've got interviews for those who want an interview.